If your DJI Osmo Action 6 footage doesn't look quite how you expected it to look, it's probably not the camera. It's usually just a few settings that need a little bit of tweaking to make it look perfect. So over the past few months, I've been using this camera quite a bit just for everyday vlogging situations. Most of the time it has been handheld. And I think I've finally found the sweet spot between image quality, stabilization, battery life, and easy editing. So in this video, I'm going to be covering some of my favorite resolution and frame rate settings, the stabilization settings that I like to use, color profile, sharpness and noise reduction, some of the low light settings, and the settings that I honestly try to avoid. So the first thing that most people usually ask when it comes to filming with an action camera is what resolution and frame rate is going to be the best. And honestly, I kind of think that some people are overcomplicating this because it's really simple. If you want more of a cinematic type look, you're going to want to film in 4K and 24 frames per second because this is kind of the industry standard, which is, what they usually use in the movies. But what I tend to use and prefer is shooting in 4K 30 frames per second. I just find that this looks really good and the best, and it's really how I want my footage to look overall, and it works best for me. Now, if you plan on slowing down your footage and getting some of that smooth slow-mo videos, the 60 frames per second is going to allow you to slow that down in your post editing and in your software. And so I really do think that filming in 4K 30 is going to be the sweet spot for most creators because it looks smooth, clean, and it's easy to work with in the editing process. One thing that this camera really nails, at least what I think, is the image stabilization. Find that for most of my videos when I'm walking, talking, vlogging, I tend to have the rock steady setting on because I feel like this gives the smoothest look. It doesn't really have any of that jittery footage that you'll see sometimes in action cameras. And if I know that I'm going to be maybe rocking my camera or holding it at a bad angle, sometimes I'll turn on the horizon balancing if I want to keep it level, but I would say 99% of the time I'm using 4K 30 and the rock steady settings. And so now I want to talk about some of the color profiles that this camera has. It can shoot in regular 10-bit color, which I find looks really good, which again, I think because it is so simple to use, I really do use the auto settings for the most part with this camera. If I feel like color grading, I will shoot in D-Log-M. It kind of just depends on what kind of mood I'm in, but honestly, I find that I film more and I want to edit more if I have to do less tweaking in the editing process, and so that's why I film mostly in auto, because it's easy. I would say that one of my favorite features of this camera is it does have some built-in preset LUTs where you can adjust the settings, you can adjust the strength of the color profile. There's a couple of different ones. If you want to see a video of some of the examples of the different color profiles, let me know in the comments down below and I will make a video about those. But if the only thing about the color profiles is that the film tones, they're not color profiles, they're called film tones. But the film tones, if you pick one, they're baked into the footage. So you have to be sure that you like it and that's how you want your footage to look, because you can't really change it in your post process editing. So you just, you want to commit. And if you don't plan to do a whole lot of color grading on your videos, then I would suggest either picking one of the film tones that you like, or two, just setting everything into the normal 10-bit color and it's going to look really good. Now, as far as the sharpening goes and noise reduction, I think straight out of the box, it comes at it's set to 0, but I find that looks a little too over processed and fake. So I changed my settings. The sharpness is set to -2 and the noise reduction is set to -2 as well. And I find that this gives the footage a really natural look, which I prefer. And I think it ranges from 0, -1, -2. So you just have to play around with it and see what you prefer. But my settings are -2 for sharpness and -2 for noise reduction. And I find that these tiny little tweaks to the settings can make the footage feel way more action camera and more like actual camera. One of the bonuses of having the DJI Osmo Action 6 camera is the sensor, and it's really good low light capabilities, which I don't film a whole lot in low light situations because I'm kind of old and I'm usually in bed by like 9 o'clock, so I'm not really out and about in the dark most days. But if I am on a rare occasion out in a low light situation, I'm probably going to just keep the settings in 4K 30 because I find that still looks really good. But if it's really dark and there isn't a whole lot of light to work with, then I'm gonna just switch it to the super night mode, which can look a little like plasticky and fake, but I mean, it gets the job done and it still looks good regardless. So just play around, take some test footage and see which you prefer. So if you want just a quick breakdown of the settings that I use for this camera, I'm going to go ahead and put them up on the screen here for you to take a look at. And I do try to cap my ISO within a certain range. Actually, let me just turn it on and see what I have it set to, because I try to keep the ISO maxed out. Let me see. No, that's wrong. Also wrong. Auto exposure. Oh, so speaking of exposure, I keep my exposure set to -3 because I find that the DJI Osmo Action 6 tends to it exposes for the highlights and it can look a little blown out, so I do tend to lower that a little bit. So -3, -7, anywhere, either of those should work for you. And then my ISO settings are set to auto, but the range is from 100 to 1600, and I find that works really well for me. Ultimately, if you have been frustrated with the footage that's been coming out of your DJI Osmo Action 6 action camera, hopefully this helps simplify things a little bit. And honestly, the biggest difference usually isn't buying another camera. It's just about learning how to get the best use out of the camera that you already have. And if you want, I can also make a full video with a beginner's guide, setting up the camera, the editing workflow that I use, or best accessories for the camera, which I've got a couple of those that I use pretty frequently if you notice the cage here. Let me know in the comments down below, and I want to thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.